We want to welcome everyone to the A is A podcast, episode number 9, where today we have Ricky and Andy with us, and we're going to discuss an awesome topic we're really excited to bring to you that affects millions of lives every day, and that is stress. So welcome, guys.
Yeah, welcome. Good to see you again.
Good to see all of you.
Our weekly meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stress,
like Josh said.
No, I'm definitely excited to talk about this. It's a topic that obviously I think it affects everyone, right? At some level, there's good and bad variations of it and whatnot, and so I'm excited to go into it today.
Yeah, I'm excited too because this is one that's not particularly my area of expertise. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about some of these things. I'll give my input and kind of direct us along as we go, and I'm curious to see what we come up with here.
Yeah, and I think this was one of our viewers that actually suggested this one.
Oh, there we go. Awesome. We'll get some listener questions, and now we can start tailoring topics to our our viewers. So yeah, like Josh said, it does affect a lot of people. Stress. Just a couple quick stats that 2/3 of Americans report that stress negatively affects their lives. So that's, the vast majority, about 200 million. And 20 million Americans have some form of anxiety that's diagnosed. So it's a lot of people, like Josh said. Just to start us off with what is stress, it's basically, the way that I would define it anyway, it's something that interacts with our physiology to stimulate basically a fight or flight response for the most part. It's like basically it's a challenge to our homeostasis. So it kind of kicks us out of where our body sort of naturally is at a given moment in one direction or another. And that causes the body to respond. So anytime you have a stress, whether it's a good stress, a bad stress, whatever, it's going to kind of push you in one direction, and then the body is going to have to adapt or respond in some way. And that can be in good ways or bad ways, which are one of the first things we're going to talk about. I figured maybe we'd kick it off by talking about the difference between good stress and bad stress. And I wanted to start here because I think when we discuss stress, a lot of people think of it as just a bad thing. And that is primarily what we'll focus on here, is helping with the negative stress and stress management and stuff. But I did want to point out right from the beginning that there is good stress, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys want to jump in and try to give some examples of what you would call good stress. Any guesses?
Well, yeah, I obviously, working out is probably one of the best stresses you could do for your body.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's something. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just pursuing any kind of like growth or the unknown in your life, is definitely a form of a stress that I think someone could label it as negative, but it with a positive outlook and goal, like that's leading to something bigger in life. So yeah, I'm always battling with that myself. Is this really worth it or a good stress, but it's leading to something better. So
yeah, that's a big characteristic of good stress, is that it does lead to something better down the road, whereas bad stress is it's going to lead to some deterioration in some way. Yeah, exercise is a big one, Ricky. That stresses what? Our muscle, our bone, various energy systems, our cardiovascular system, and so on. And so the adaptation there is bigger, stronger muscles, denser bones, improvements in your cardiovascular system, and so on. So stress is definitely, if there's a certain direction you want your body or mind or whatever to go in, you're going to have to apply some stress to get you there. Other examples of good stresses, I'm thinking maybe like some environmental stress, like sun exposure, that's a stress on the body. Heat exposure, like sauna use, cold exposure, fasting, that's a stress on the body. But all of these things are therapeutic if used in the right dosages. And I actually like that Josh already touched on something that I wanted to bring up later, which is just that it's easy for a good stress to become bad if you do too much. Think of people who try to work out, 7 days a week, right? Now, all of a sudden that good stress is you've put too much of it in, or maybe sun exposure, like I said, a little bit is great, you know, to stimulate vitamin D production and so on. But if you lay in the sun for 3 hours, you're going to get a sunburn. That's bad stress, you know, and so on. So any of these things can be taken too far. So that's the environmental stresses. You know, they result in adaptations like improved immune function, a reduced inflammatory response, if at the right and appropriate dosages. Another one I had was just like something like studying or practicing an instrument or anything like that. Like really, Josh already touched on anything where you're bringing yourself outside of your comfort zone and trying to learn something new or develop a new skill. Now you're stressing, we'll say, your brain in a way, you know, neuronal pathways and so on. And the result there is learning and rewiring the brain. You know, that's skill practice is a bit of a stress, but it results in these good adaptations, these things that we're aiming for.
Now, I've had plenty of stress from studying. I can definitely say that firsthand.
Yep.
But anytime there's a test involved, normally that's a pretty high stress.
Yep.
But one thing you mentioned that kind of, I never thought of it as a stress, I guess. And I guess it is in some ways, is fasting.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a big concept that I kind of do personally. It's something that I really do believe in, and something I even said in another podcast where I would fast for 3 days at a time.
Or sometimes do 1 meal a day, right?
Right. Yeah. So some sort of intermittent fasting. And for me, I guess I never felt like it was a stress, but I could definitely.
You're doing it in appropriate levels and you're choosing to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I could see how fasting or starving could be definitely a huge stress.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. If you fast for too long, it definitely becomes stressful on the body in a negative way, just like exercise, too much.
Yeah. Too much exercise, your muscles can't recover. So you're just constantly fatigued, constantly damaged. And yeah, that's just no good either.
Yep.
I think there's a really interesting piece here that we're getting into where we're looking at like what Jordan Peterson says about the balance between chaos and order, like between what would be deemed negative stress versus positive stress, and the balance between that, because that is a constant battle. Like how many workout sessions in a week can you handle where it's positive versus negative? You know, how much studying could you do? Like, you know, how many hours do you work in a week? You know, like whatever it may be, it's a sliding scale. And I think having an awareness around when you're going too far, right, one way is cannot be so good, you know. But yeah, I like how Jordan puts that with the balance between chaos and order. I view that as stress, you know.
Yeah.
Right, because I mean, yeah, stress is good for, you know, I guess everybody. I mean, you need a certain amount of stress. So like you're saying, there's a certain amount of stress that's good for you and it benefits you, and then you kind of improve or, you know, achieve something in the end. But then there, like you said, there's that fine line where, you know, I work out quite a bit. I work out 6 days a week sometimes.
And we've all experienced overtraining because we've all gone a little too far at times. Right?
Oh, I've definitely overtrained quite a few times in my past, and I've tried to, you know, obviously optimize my workout to fit a 6 day a week schedule. But sometimes I still notice like, wow, it's like as I'm getting, you know, progressively overloading my weights by week, like 5, 6, maybe 7 in my program, I tend to be like, okay, my weights are getting heavier and heavier every week. I'm starting to feel a little more fatigued. Maybe the 6 days a week isn't good for me. Maybe I should tone it back to 4 and then put in some rest days or some sort of like movement days and things like that. And so, yeah, I get where you're coming from with, there's that fine line and that balance, and you really have to read your body in order to determine what level is enough for you or that you could handle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just like Josh said, it's all about awareness. You have to be constantly paying attention to if the level of stress is appropriate. And I think one of the best ways to determine if your level of stress is appropriate or not with any kind of stress, right now we're talking about working out, but are you getting better day after day? Are you getting better in the long run? You know, because if you're working out and you find you're getting stronger, your energy levels are improving, you're performing better, and you're keeping on that pattern day after day, week after week, month after month, then you're probably using the appropriate amount of stress. But if you hit a plateau or you start to go backwards and all of a sudden you don't feel like going to the gym, your energy levels are down, you're fatigued, you're not lifting what you did the weeks prior, then that's a sign that you probably went overboard and the stress level was too high. And that concept applies to every form of stress. You know, I mean, studying, you know, if you study half an hour a night, then you're probably gonna, you know, learn the material and not be overwhelmed. But if you're trying to cram 40 hours of studying into 1 week, you might find yourself falling apart by the end. You know, that's good stress is sustainable, whereas bad stress is not sustainable. It's going to take you down in the long run.
Yeah, and I think like some good check-ins with yourself, you know, are you happy daily? Like, do you feel satisfied, inspired? It doesn't mean that you don't have a lot going on, but like those deep inner feelings that we can check in with, if it's a good form of stress, you should be pretty amped up to start the day, you know, go to that next step, whatever it may be. Negative stress or too much stress will lead to the depression, anxiety, you know, poor sleep, high heart rate, all of that stuff. And so, you know, I find that like when I have a big challenge in front of me or I feel that stress is elevated, I can dictate between the two with if it's good, probably pretty happy, satisfied, and I'm inspired by what I'm doing. And if it's bad, you know, I'm anxious, you know, negative, maybe angry. I get agitated easy. I don't sleep well. My appetite's off. So I'm bouncing between those check-ins constantly.
Exactly. Yep. So just to wrap up good stress real quick, I'll just say some of the characteristics. It tends to be acute. You know, usually the good stresses are going to be whatever, 15 minutes to 2 hours. You know, a workout session is 45 minutes. Laying in the sun or going in the sauna could be, you know, 15 minutes of laying in the sun, going in the sauna for 20 minutes, laying in an ice bath for 15 minutes. You know, they tend to be shorter, more acute things generally, the acute stresses. And they're also, they're usually, almost always are voluntary. Like that's the thing with good stress is it's something you're choosing to engage with versus something that you feel is being forced upon you and that you're kind of stuck in or trapped by. So the good stresses are the kind of things we choose and we use them at the appropriate dosages and they have a positive outcome in the long run. I think the big theme with good stress is anti-fragility. You know, it's this is the Nassim Taleb's concept of being anti-fragile, where we grow and get stronger via exposure to these stresses. And that's why we're choosing to engage with them. You know, your body is always either growing and improving or it's in decline. And the good stress helps us grow and makes us better. It's kind of how I might wrap up that section, I think. So if we were to talk about bad stress, which is probably going to be this is where we'll stick it with for the podcast, because I think this is where people need the most help. I don't know. Do you guys want to just kick us off with examples of what you would call bad stress?
Bad stress. I mean, I would say work. Work can be the biggest bad stress on anybody.
I think it's the main one. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause you know, it's something that you have to do every day. And
there's that involuntary piece that I was talking about.
Right. And if you have a bad boss or if you just don't get along with someone at work and you're still forced to be there with them every day. I mean, I think that can be where bad stress kind of comes in. That's probably one of the biggest that affects probably most people.
Yeah. I had this listed in my notes as I call it rat race stress. And it's just, you know, you're always on the go. You always feel like you have too much on your plate, never ending to-do lists, working a job that you hate, which, you know, unfortunately we hear people say all the time that they hate their job. They wish they could leave. They hate their boss. They don't get along with their coworkers and so on, you know? So exactly what you said, Ricky, I put that under, I just call it the rat race that Americans live in.
Yeah, that's, I think, Andy, what you were saying, like 87% are not satisfied with their job. So it's a very high number. And, you know, I'll throw a unique perspective, an opinion of mine into that with what both of you just said with work. Being that I feel that having no control of where you choose to spend your time is a huge form of stress. So time is one of the only non-renewable resources out there, right? Like it's just we're losing more of it as days go on. And so
I would call it the most precious resource we have.
correct. And the number one reason that I'm an entrepreneur and I've crafted what we've done here is to control my time. Not saying that I don't work a lot, right? But I can dictate when and how that looks. And, I did the cubicle life for 3 years out of college, and I worked for, like what Ricky said, some bad bosses and whatnot. And having someone have other control over you, I know it's not for everyone the route that I've taken or, some people take with that, but I think that you're seeing more companies pop up now that are lifestyle companies, unlimited vacation, flexible work hours, remote or in office. And I think it goes back to not necessarily hating your job, and that can be the case in many cases for sure, or even a shitty boss, but it's not having control of your time. So like, if you work 52 weeks out of the year and you get 2 weeks off and the rest of that is 8 to 5, mundane, something you're not inspired by, surrounded by people you don't like or want to be like or emulate, and then you have an asshole boss on you, that's really not that enjoyable. And that is a very high form of stress. But I think that, especially, and I think COVID really, the new way of working remotely exposed and brought to light the benefits of having more control of your time, being home more, being with your family more, choosing when you want to work, how you work, because we had to become really adaptive with the new times of that. And so I think that obviously, and we'll talk about this later in the episode, but choosing something that's motivating in life is great, from a work perspective. But if you can't, crafting a lifestyle around where you have control of time and freedom is big.
Yep.
Right.
I love, you're so the lack of control, like I said before, the good stresses you choose, the bad stresses tend to be ones where you don't have any control over them and you feel like you're being controlled by this outside force, and that becomes a massive stress on you. I like what you said about time. I just want to comment on that. I remember reading somewhere about time being the most precious resource. And I think I read something about how, and this is not like an exact statistic or anything, but how like the typical, a lot of people think that what they want most in life might be, who knows, let's say money or whatever. But if you take someone who's even like 50 years old and a billionaire, if you could tell them, I'll instantly let you go back in time and be 30 years old again, but you're broke, would you accept that? And almost everyone would take, heck, I'd go back 5 years, and give up. If I was a billionaire, I'd say, send me back 5 years and make me broke. Like, we only have one life as far as we know. And, it's always going away. I think everyone always would rather have more time and more life than anything.
Now, I wanted to also comment on the COVID thing. Like, while I did like working from home and I like that freedom to choose if I work from home or in the office, there are some places that have gone completely remote now. And some people are actually stressing more now that they have to work from home and they're not in an office. And so it can go both ways, I guess. It just depends on the person, because my uncle, in fact, he used to work for a computer company, and they're like, why are we paying all this money for this building when everybody can do the same amount of work from home and we're still just as productive? But he liked going into work and he liked seeing the people there and he liked interacting with other people other than just his immediate family every single day. So I think having, like you guys were saying, a balance where if he could have still choose to go in on certain days, but still choose to be with his family on other days, I think that's what's kind of needed.
And you touched on that, how Oh, you touched on how individual it is. You know, some people might like one situation, some people might like another, which is why the awareness piece that Josh was talking about is so important. You got to constantly be checking in with yourself about what is it about your situations that are causing you stress and what is it that needs to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
That's an awareness piece that you just have to build through introspection, by paying attention to your life and how you feel.
Yeah, and that's highly individual, because I'll take it down to the kid level. You know, we've got 3 cousins staying here at our house now with Asher, and they have the option of this kind of schooling that they want to do right now. And so one kid wants to do all remote, the other wants the hybrid, and then the other wants all in person. And so you can sort of see as their adulthood, maybe where that'll go, right, in terms of some of that. And, you know, I realized this a long time ago with the control of your time when we built Co-Movement, and the people that work for Co-Movement was, and Andy, you can vouch for this, I never dictate schedules, right?
Right.
And ever. And I always, yeah, I always leave it up to you. Work when you want, as hard as you want, as much as you want. And for 11 years, that's worked really, really well, because obviously we've attracted the best team ever. And so they make consciously good choices. But Andy, like, you have like 3-day weekends and like a half day here and there. And like, you're able to craft that around your lifestyle, which is, you know, healthy eating, you know, you can sleep the hours you want, you rock
out when you want to.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like, now, if you had to be a trainer working 6 days a week, you know, 5 sessions a day, split shifts all over the place, you'd be burnt out in 6 months. And
sure. Or if you told me, hey, I've got a new client for you that wants to work out at 5 a.m. and you have to take this client, you don't have a choice, I'd be like, I'm getting another job.
Exactly. Exactly.
You should be like, send them to Ricky instead.
Yeah, there you go. That doesn't fit my schedule.
Yeah, and, you know, as like sort of the person that assigns, right, from the company perspective with new clients, I am more than I'm fine with giving people, putting people on a wait list, right, because it doesn't fit our team's current schedule. Because you know, keeping the team happy in regards to the scheduling is going to keep the lifestyle, right, motivated, inspired, healthy, and then you're better, and we are all better at our jobs when we're in it.
Yeah, this is touching on something that I was going to mention later, which is how you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. But this is like from a business perspective. I mean, you're making sure you're taking care of the people who work for you and yourself. Like, we're taking care of our staff so that they can be better people and better fulfill their role as trainers and coaches and be more effective at their jobs. It's better in the long run.
Yeah. And we've had, Andy, me and you, numerous conversations about being strict with self-care time, right? And saying no to certain days or blocks of days that you just don't want. Like, and that needs to happen all the time, I think, in people's lives, where they have what I call boundaries. You know, I've had 2 clients in the last 2 weeks that requested to work with me. They were former clients, and you've seen them here. But they had the days and the times that I did not want. And so I took that cut in pay, essentially, you can view it like that, because I want to be inside with the family at dinner time. And that's just, and I gave them alternative options, but they didn't work, and that life goes on. You know, I don't want to be, again, I think I have a control issue there, but like, there's a balance. We all work really, really hard, but within the concepts and time that we want to do. Some people that's 80 hours, maybe some people that's 20 hours. I don't know. We can't judge that based on our perception, because it's highly individual.
I'd say another, so you mentioned like the rat race stress and all that. Another one might be a big one these days is just constant bombardment of negative media. I think that's a big contributor. Like the this past year, politics, the pandemic. Like, I mean, how many people just sit in front of these 24-hour news networks and just watch them all day long? And you can see what that does to their mentality and their stress level, you know?
Yeah, news is very toxic and very stressful.
Yeah, big time.
Like if
The tip there is turn it off.
yeah, that's almost I'd almost put that over work
Yeah.
in some cases.
I think
'cause-
so. I wouldn't have in the past, but I think the last
Yeah.
few years have like elevated that to maybe the number one.
Yeah, some people get obsessed with that, and then it gets to a point where it really negatively impacts both themselves and others around them.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
think
massive.
about it, like if we say that, you know, our values are defined as where we spend our time, money, energy, and thoughts, and you spend 4 hours a day watching that shit show, I can guarantee I have a very clear outlook for your future and how you act, perceive the world, treat others. It's the news, you know, I stopped watching the news years ago. We don't even have cable. Because I don't believe in it. You know, I think that there's a back end agenda with advertising, clickbait headlines. Negative news drives way more than positive news. And you know, there's always an equal balance. We know that. And so it does me no good to know the shitty stuff that's going on in the world. It does me absolutely no good because I want to be in control and working on myself and my family and my business of what can then reach out and make the world better. The news, you know, that, and it's gotten worse. It's gotten significantly worse because of marketing, advertising. People love the negative. Maybe unconsciously that makes them feel better about their life. I'm not sure about the psychology behind it, but Ricky, you said maybe that could be worse than the workplace piece. The news is horrible.
Yeah, I don't know the psychology behind it either, but you're right. Like the negative stuff definitely gets more views, and that's why it drives ratings. And so, like you said, the news has a bias towards just sensationalism and drama and negativity. You know, I always say like, if a plane crashes, you're going to hear about it on the news, but no one is reporting about the 10,000, 50,000 planes that landed safely that day.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reporter standing outside the airport going, we just wanted to let you know that flight whatever just landed safely on the tarmac and everyone's getting off. It looks like a great day and the sun's shining. Have a good day, everybody.
And
you don't
like
see that report.
From a business perspective, like if I sent out an email through MailChimp today that said co-movement closes and goes bankrupt versus the top 5 tips for happiness, the open rate would be tenfold the bankruptcy.
Yeah, all that clickbait stuff.
I wish I could figure out what it is that drives people to, you know, to consume that stuff. Like why people will click on a negative thing over a positive thing. Like, you know, Josh, you said maybe like seeing other people's lives in disarray or seeing other people struggling makes you feel better about yourself. So maybe like you enjoy seeing negative things happening in the world. I don't know. That's kind of a sick mindset though, if that's the case.
No, I think that's it. And you know, we can call it what it is. And that's, I think that if you don't maybe perceive you having a lot going for yourself in life, that it takes anything that you can get to see something that's worse than what you have. And you see it in conversations when people gossip. They're not gossiping about that person's achievements ever. It's always about, oh, their kid did this, or I can't believe, you know, Susie did this. And, you know, it's very rarely positive. And all of that, I think, circles back to sort of what Dr. John DeMartini talked a lot about, with just inflating yourself through almost viewing or putting down others, right? So if you have a 20-minute conversation on how bad Susie's life is, by default, you're feeling better about yourself. But when you really dig deep down that rabbit hole, the reason you're trying to highlight Susie's negative is because you're not truly satisfied in your own life. And that's a pill.
If viewers wanted to learn a little bit more about, because I know you like John DeMartini, what was his book? It was called The Values Factor?
Yeah, I've got a few in my office. Values Factor, The Breakthrough Experience, and then Inspired Destiny. Those 3 books had a massive impact on me to the point
Mhm.
where like ever since then, like there's so much insight and perception on where people stand in their life based on just
Mhm.
actions, thoughts, words, how they post on Facebook. It's very, very deep stuff. It's very interesting. But Andy, you've read a few of them yourself, right? Or no?
I read The Values Factor. Yeah, great book. I
Great.
really like that one.
Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. And
Um,
he will, Dr. John DeMartini, it's the way that he talks and frames questions is gonna
Mhm.
have you get real honest with yourself real fast. And
yeah, and he's got like he's got exercises in the book too that you can kind of work through, like pages you can fill in if you have the paper copy. To kind of like learn a little bit more about yourself and where your stresses come from and what your values are and whether you're living in alignment with them.
yeah. So
Now, well, I wanted to talk about something else. I think, Josh, you and I talked about it at one point, where it's not just all the negative things, news, negativity, and that is stressful and that can cause a lot of stress. But why I also got off a lot of social media was seeing everyone post all the positive things about their life.
Right.
And then you get depressed or you get stressed out because you're like, why isn't my life as good as all these other people?
Cool. You just hit my next bullet point. Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, this was a big one for me. And
Yep.
I was like, I found myself comparing myself to everybody.
Yep.
And I was like, why should I be so worried about what all these other people are doing or what and all this? Why don't I just focus on myself and try to make myself the best version of me versus that comparison.
It leads to, I think the term is FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Because you see all these other people posting all their, their amazing lives, or so it seems on social media. And then you feel like you're missing out on all the amazing things that are happening in their lives. When really they're just posting the highlights and embellishing.
Yeah,
for the most part.
I think Elon Musk said in the Joe Rogan podcast that if you get rid of social media ads or off social media, your happiness goes up 10% overnight. Like just super fast. That's a big boost real quick when you're not comparing yourselves to others' fantasy life.
Yeah. And so, that's something, because obviously I do a lot of the social media stuff for Co-Movement now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I'm on a lot of these platforms a lot more than I used to be. Yeah. Obviously, I don't have that same thought or mindset that I did in the past when I was younger, but I see a lot of these same things where a lot of these popular channels, they're all pretty much just objectifying either a woman or a man in some way. And they're just like, look at my workout, and they're just in like skimpy outfits or in whatever. But I'm like, that's not kind of what I want, our outlook to be. I want ours to be a little more wholesome. I want it to be like good, clean content.
Yep. Not trying to give people unrealistic expectations of what life should be,
Right.
All these pictures of, like, let's say fitness models and stuff with, looking perfect all the time and the best lighting and everything. And then you're like, oh man, like I work out and
I don't look anything like that, So so that's kind of, what I'm trying to say is I try to keep our content cleaner. And it may not be as flashy and as popular as these women in skimpy outfits, but at least it means something, and you'll actually learn something from it.
Love it. And it's real. It's going to make you better over time. Healthier mindset, happier life. Yep. The next one I had, simple one. We don't have to spend much time on this unless you guys have a lot to say about it, but like financial stress, that's an obvious one. Some people are doing well, some people aren't. Some people who appear to be doing well may not be. It might just be appearances. They might have a huge house and great car, but hundreds of thousands on these things. But a lot of people are working multiple jobs and not making as much as they used to. During the pandemic, a lot of businesses closed and stuff. So particularly right now, I think a lot of people are maybe struggling with some financial difficulties, very, very common, wears on you day in and day out. And that's another one that's, involuntary. Nobody wants to be living paycheck to paycheck, that can definitely wear on you in the long run. if you don't find a solution to it.
Yeah, and I'll chime into that because it's a topic that I'm very interested in. And because it's one of the biggest reasons for divorce and stress in relationships. And it's
Money
a
issues.
huge, in money, and it's a huge form of anxiety for people. And so there's sort of three areas that, and I have this bulleted here, but because I just knew this would be brought up, but so being super organized in finance. So that doesn't mean complicated, but super organized. So there's generally three things that I like to myself do so I don't have anxiety over finances, whether it's good or bad. Being super organized with finances, even if it's bad, is much better than being unorganized and bad. You will automatically see your anxiety lower when you know where you stand. And so like for reducing stress, definitely knowing exactly your monthly expenses. And like, I'm not going to get into a finance course here, but like, I think that this is very important for people because we can tell lots of people to eat more vegetables, but then if they're stressed out 90% of the time about money, that's not going to help them. So know exactly where your expenses go. And I mean to the dollar. And I mean like you build in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet or do it on paper. And every month at the end of the month, you write down your credit card bill, your heat bill, your electric bill, your mortgage, your rent, you know, miscellaneous spending, and you track it every month. And you know exactly where the money went, cash, credit, everything. And that's not hard to do. I'm telling you, I spend literally 5 minutes a month doing that. And then the next is know what's coming in. For W-2 employees, that's very easy. They have a check. You know, for people that get sources of revenue from multiple places, it gets a little harder, but it's still not hard. So then you know what's going out, what's coming in. And then the third, what most people don't do, and I highly encourage it. I started this in, let's see, it would have been about 12 or 13 years ago. I can't exactly pin it down, but I went to apply for my first mortgage and they had us do a net worth sheet. And I had a negative net worth of like 80 grand or something between like car payments and student loans and credit card. And I was like, it was like a punch in the face, like Dave Ramsey 101 level, like this is what your net worth is. And so, but what was amazing with that realization was that as bad as that was, I felt almost inspired to see that change because I knew where I stood instead of ignoring it. And so I recommend people to do a net worth sheet, and I'll explain what that is in a second, once or twice a year. That's it. Don't do it monthly, don't do it quarterly. And for most people, I'd say once a year is fine. All that is taking all of your assets. So it could be equity in a car, it could be you know, equity in your house, bank accounts, investment accounts, cash, whatever in your checking, all the plus. Like I tell people, if you were to cash out today, like clear it all and move to Costa Rica on the beach, like what could you get rid of? What is that number? And then on the other side would be your liabilities. So assets, liabilities, your liabilities. What do you owe on your house? What do you owe on your car? What other loan you have? Credit cards, student loans, you know, that's the negative. And then you get a number and that could be, you know, whatever it is. But with the finance piece, when you see that number change, even slightly for the better, there's a huge sense of relief that you're getting somewhere. And so
it shows you have control over the situation.
Correct. And like you would think, and most people avoid the two out of it. Most people know what's coming in, but a lot of people avoid the expense sheet and then the net worth because like what you just said, Andy, they don't want to know. But yet they're stressing over the mountain on it and they're anxious. And so it's sort of like, you gotta either not stress about it and not care, which is there's no problem with that because you're not stressing about it. But if this thing is eating you up and you're honest with yourself, then do the work. And it,
Yep. You have to find a way to take control over it.
yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you know,
I think a lot of people have no idea what's going in and what's going out.
exactly. And the last thing I can say with this is that if we go back to the first topic we brought up today, was control of your time. If you're a spender and a consumer at the highest level, I can guarantee you, unless you make a ton of money, you are going to have very little control of your time because you need to make more. If you don't contribute much to the whole Amazon and buying, and I got to buy my happiness and have this next new car every 3 years and have the biggest house on the block and the tractor that's $20,000 and a four-wheeler and a snowmobile, but then you're bitching about being stressed at your job and hating your boss, to me, that's a contradiction. So like if you were to lower your expenses to the bare minimum, and by the way, you're not going to see a change in your happiness other than possibly going up. You're not going to be less happy because you have less shit. That's guaranteed. But like when your expenses are at a bare minimum, and Andy, we've talked about this a lot, like the minimalistic approach, right? Like being a minimalist has a ton of benefits because on the other side, your incoming can go down. And if your incoming can come down, you have more control of your time and you have less stress, almost guaranteed.
Yep. I love that you talked about overconsumption. And, you know, I think so overconsumption leads to a lot of financial stress because you're spending money and you may not have enough to cover all that. But I think the reason that a lot of people overconsume and buy so much is because they're almost trying to purchase happiness. You know, because they feel stressed and whatever, and they want to be happy. Everyone wants to be happy. And there's a mindset, and especially in America, where people think that owning that car will make me happy, or having that new pair of jeans will make me happy, or that new pair of shoes, or whatever. And so they're always trying to spend money and they might get like an initial, those things might make you feel happy for like a few hours or a few days. But in the long run, they just lead to more financial stress. You know, I love the quote from the movie Fight Club, you know, that the things you own end up owning you. So, and that's like a great way to think about how the minimalistic approach is actually kind of leads to more freedom and more happiness in the long run.
Yeah. And Harvard did a study a few years back. It was 4 or 5 years that said happiness.
Was this the annual salary that maximizes happiness or whatever?
Yeah. So like for an individual at 75,000 a year is the maximal happiness. And then it plateaus up to like 180, I think. So like we're sort of floating that high level up to 180. But like beyond that, happiness decreases. And so if you're looking to achieve maximal happiness, you know, that 75,000 range seems to be the maximally happy that you can see. And the reason I think that is because that person has to work, in most cases, not all, but much less than the person making 3 million a year, guaranteed almost. So
that person has a lot on their plate, a lot more responsibilities.
Right. Yeah. They're like managing individuals. They're traveling probably a good percentage of their time. And yeah. And in some cases, even managing a company. And if you're managing an entire company like that, that's like, that can be a lot of stress on somebody.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, you know, we've talked about, I think this in the past, I think maybe even another podcast, we talked about how, you know, choosing a career that gives you the best quality of life. Like I would choose a job that I can then enjoy my life over choosing a job that gives me a higher pay.
For sure.
Absolutely.
And I think more
the goal
people,
is happiness in the long run, not just a number in your bank account.
Yeah, more people need that mindset. Live within your means and basically choose the job that gives you the highest level of happiness.
Yep.
I'll touch on next we had was just the stress of a poor diet. You know, unhealthy foods do put a negative stress on the body. Vegetable seed oils are inflammatory. Excessive sugars and refined carbohydrates and processed foods, inflammatory, damage your arteries over time, lead to high blood pressure. You know, these are physiological stresses, but they do add up to poor health in the long run, which is a different kind of stress. That's not a mental stress, but it's a negative stress on your physiology. Overconsumption of caffeine
Yeah, and I'll say just Andy with the food piece, having less time generally means poorer choices. So
Yeah, so they tie in.
well, I think they tie in beautifully. If you're living in an airport and you're in business meetings and you can't even get a lunch break, right? Or you're home at 7 at night versus 5 and you don't want to cook fresh food, so you just go for the chips, right? Again, time. But if you have more time, and COVID again proved this, and we heard it from clients, being home, they were cooking, they planted gardens, they had time and energy to actually invest into eating healthy, which is big.
It is.
So I'll wrap this up. We'll talk about some stress solutions here for people. We've kind of touched on a bunch as we've gone, but I'll just wrap up the bad stress thing, the characteristics of bad stress, kind of comparing it to the good stress. Bad stress tends to be chronic, not acute. It's something that's kind of day in and day out. Chronically elevated cortisol causes a lot of problems: inflammation, immune suppression, increased risk of all cardiovascular disease, strokes, heart attacks, that kind of thing. Lower testosterone in men. It's got a huge endocrine disrupting component to it. Leads to poor sleep. So, and I mean, the big one is chronic stress is highly associated with greater mortality, just a shorter lifespan in general.
And fat storage, right?
Oh yeah, the elevated cortisol, exactly. Weight gain, yep. So a lot of effects on your physical health. Bad stress, I think, is predominantly mental, really. We tend to stress out over things and over situations. Like if your big stress is work, let's say, you're not always just stressing about it at work. People bring their work home with them and they stress out all night long about, the job they have to go to tomorrow, or people ruminate on like a conversation that they had earlier in the day with someone who just upset them, pissed them off in some way. So a lot of bad stress is just these negative thoughts that we ruminate on. I'll give you the story. I love the story in Buddhism about this. It's about carrying stress with you, longer than you need to, and just ruminating on mentally. But there's this like a really famous story, so people might have heard of it, but like it's just like it's a fictional thing. But there's like these two Buddhist monks, and they're in their practice they're supposed to be celibate, and they're not supposed to have any contact with women. They're not supposed to touch women, and so on. And they're walking through the woods, walking a path in the woods, and they get to a river, and they want to cross the river, and the bridge is down. And so they're thinking, oh, we'll just wade through it. And there's a woman standing there, and she wants to cross the river too. And she's like, how am I going to get across, And one of the Buddhist monks picks her up and carries her across the river and sets her down on the other side. And she's like, thank you, I appreciate it. And she goes on her way. And so the Buddhist monks carry on. They keep walking through the woods on the other side of the river, and they walk for a couple hours. And the other monk who did not carry the woman, he's kind of upset about this. He's a little bit troubled. He's like thinking like, we're not supposed to interact with women. We're not supposed to touch them, in their particular practice. And this guy just picked up this woman and carried her across the stream, and he's thinking about it, and it's bothering him, and he's kind of like upset about this. And finally, after a couple hours of walking, he says to the other monk, what did you do back there? Why did you do that? We're not supposed to interact with women at all. And you picked her up and carried her across the stream. And the monk that did that looks at him and goes, well, yeah, but I put her down 2 hours ago. You seem to still be carrying her. So the point is, like, he did what the situation called for at the time, and then like forgot about it immediately, and the stress was over. Whereas the other guy was like troubled about it for hours afterwards. Stress is a highly mental thing. Like, we can choose to worry about it and ruminate on it for a long time, or maybe you get in a traffic jam, whatever, you get out of it, forget about it. Don't worry about it for hours on end.
That's a great story, Andy. A book I read years ago, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
Yeah. Zapolsky.
Yeah,
he was awesome.
Yeah, that book was freaking awesome. Like, and it was exactly what you're saying, that like now most of our stress is truly mental. We're not really worried about like a tiger eating us, or starving to death, or freezing to death, or drowning. we're not worried about 99% of the stress that our ancestors, right, used to deal with. Now it's purely mental, and a lot of it is very perception based. You're just you're perceiving that as stressful and I'm not, right? Like that story you just said. And so yeah, and but our bodies are, I think, designed to handle quite a bit of physical stress. But the mental piece, we have not adapted to endless amounts of stress.
No, that's very new to us. We've created that in the last few hundred years, I think. Yeah. Interesting dilemma for the modern age, but something we need to learn how to deal with, I think, as a society.
Yep.